Welcome aboard the St. Crapo. The date is June 20th, 1928. It's a Tuesday, and we're aboard the St. Crapo getting ready to go up the Davis Lock at Sault Saint Marie. Aboard are Mr. and Mrs. St. Crapo, their daughter, one of her friends from school, and two young men that are supposedly also from her school, which would be Vassar University. In the background, we see the steamer Henry Ford going up the Sabin Lock. How do I know this? Well, because I looked at the passages, and it shows the Crapo going up at 1:30 and the Ford going up at 1 o'clock. Here's the young gentleman explaining to Mrs. Crapo how the locks actually work, as if he knows how the locks actually work. Good stern view of the Crapo here. Note here the deckhands tossing lines up onto the lock wall. Here we see the gates closing. Notice the gate attendants riding each gate. The Davis Lock was opened in 1914. It was 1,350 feet long, 80 feet wide, and had a depth of 24 feet. Now, the only electricity used in this operation is opening and closing the gates and opening and closing the valves that let the water in or out of the lock. The actual lifting is done by gravity. Now we see the Henry Ford going under the jackknife bridge. And if you watch closely, you'll see the bridge is closing right behind her in order to allow a train to pass. And there goes the train. Sorry for you railroad buffs, we're too far away to see any specifics of the train, but there it goes. Here's the Crapo making some of her big coal smoke that she was so famous for as she heads out of the lock. Now the bridge is opening for us. This is a good view of the St. Mary's Rapids. That's why the locks were constructed, to get around those rapids. Once on the way out of the St. Mary's River and into Whitefish Bay, it was time for some filmed shenanigans. You can see here that they're exercising on the lines that would normally keep the canvas awning over top of the forecastle deck and keep it cool inside the forecastle. they have an astonishing amount of faith in those lines. You see as they swing on them and do somersaults on them. Wow, isn't that acrobatic? What they're forgetting is the deck under their feet is steel. There are no gym mats down there. So if that line breaks, or if you slip, you're going to have a headache. Normally you'd think that the captain or the mate would come down and tell them to knock that off. But when you've got the namesake's passengers on board, you don't do that sort of stuff. Here's some nice recliners. Some more gymnastics. And now some party game style things. I guess this is how far back can you lean, or do you trust the person behind you? Never trust the person behind you. You don't know where he's going to grab you. And here's climbing the mast. And watch right behind him, you'll see one of the women. Ice cream. Newfangled thing for Great Lakes vessels, but VIPs get whatever they want. Here's Mrs. Crapo selecting her seat for a little bit of lounging. I'm not quite sure what the weather was that day, but it doesn't look like there's any bright sun beating down on these folks. Now this footage had to be highly edited. I had to slow it down to about 47% because this was a hand-cranked camera. And so when the film was processed, it looked like everybody was running in fast motion. And I managed to use a little computer magic to get their motion back down to something that looked normal. There is Mr. Crapo. And apparently either they brought some books with them, or the vessel may have had a small library. Guest accommodations were first class in those days. There we see Mr. and Mrs. Crapo in their lounge chairs, enjoying their trip across Whitefish Bay. I don't know what the book is, but there's a lot of drama involved here for the camera. And as they got out farther on Whitefish Bay, they discovered that even in June, summer has yet to come to Sault Saint Marie. This is a really good shot of the Crapo departing. Well, you can tell this is the Crapo and not her sister ship, the John W. Boardman, because the Crapo has that doghouse on her poop deck behind the stack. The Boardman didn't have one of those in 1928. I don't know where or when this was shot, but this is really good footage of the Crapo departing and putting out some really good black smoke. Every lake boat buff has got to love this. If you didn't stay to this part of it, it's your loss. And now, let's all take our hats off to Sarah, who provided this family footage for us to journey back in time to 1928 in the first seasons of the St. Crapo. She is Mr. Crapo's great-granddaughter, and she found this footage and brought it for us.